if 10 years from now, you have a spinal cord injury and you are not immediately implanted with this system to empower you to recover more, then we have failed. Let's be very clear. That's our mission, and as Jocelyne said, we are running out of time. And we know this therapy is effective. It's not a miracle, but it's effective. This is the first therapy that will help people to regain movement. So our mission, our responsibility is to bring it to everyone who needs it.
It's very surreal that I'm part of this. I sometimes wake up and I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing this. Like, this is like, you know, I'm the sort of the second person in the world. There's only a handful of us in the world that have had this kind of thing and are doing this. So I'm part of this. Like, that's cool.
Hi, I'm Tom Whipple, science writer at The Times. For this episode of Planet Hope, we're in Lausanne, Switzerland, to meet neuroscientist Grégoire Courtine, a Rolex Awards laureate, and neurosurgeon Jocelyne Bloch. Together, they've achieved something once thought impossible, helping people with spinal cord injuries to walk again. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people around the world suffer spinal cord injuries, many of whom face a lifetime of paralysis, until now. By combining neuroscience, engineering, and AI, they've created a revolutionary digital bridge that reconnects the brain and the spine, offering hope to millions. We're here to see the technology in action and meet one of the patients whose life it has already transformed. Grégoire, Jocelyne, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you.
Grégoire, if I can start with you. Take us back to when you became interested in mobility.
Well, as far as I remember, movement has always been central in my life. I grew passionate of sport and especially of rock climbing, and movement gave me a lot of pleasure, especially fighting gravity. So when I was first a physicist and after interested in movement science, I met at actually the bottom of a rock climbing wall a professor of neuroscience who told me actually the brain calculates how to activate our muscles in order to climb. And I found it fascinating. This is how I started my career in neuroscience, trying to understand how the brain controls movement. And that's when I faced people with paralysis who have lost the capacity to move. Based on my love for movement, it became unbearable. And that's why I decided to dedicate my scientific career to the search of a cure for paralysis.
And you worked with the Christopher and Dana Reeves Foundation, named after the now late actor who was himself paralysed following a horse riding accident. What impact did that have on you, and what was the experience like?
You know, I'm a kid from the 70s, so when I was young, Superman was the only real figure of a superhero. And I had a little puppet, pretty big actually, I was playing with Superman. So when he became paralyzed, it was a shock to start with. And then when I was a postdoc at UCLA, I integrated the Christopher Foundation. And Christopher was still alive for 1 year when I was a researcher in the foundation. He was clearly an inspiration because he's one who said, paralysis must be cured. And he believed that the treatment could be developed.
Well, you went on to try to do that curing, and you worked closely with Jocelyne on this. What did people think of, I mean, it sounds like an astonishing goal, one of these goals that can't be achieved. What did people think when you began pursuing it?
I mean, we need to recalibrate expectation here. So the dream is to cure paralysis. We are very far from achieving this dream. Still, you know, if you don't set huge objective, you will never at least achieve maybe a therapy that is meaningful. And that's what we are trying to achieve now. So what we are aiming at achieving here is to change how society perceives the permanence of paralysis. And Jocelyne and I believe that paralysis can no longer be a life sentence. And that's what we are trying to achieve right now.
Jocelyne, talk us through what is a spinal cord injury? What happens? How does it affect people? What changes that means that people are paralyzed?
So walking or other functions are I mean, the vast majority, the brain is giving a command and it goes through the spinal cord to activate either your limbs or your bladder or any function of your body. And after a spinal cord injury is a bit like having your road broken, and the command coming from the brain is not anymore activating your limbs, and that's what happens. And it's an immediate problem. And we know that there are currently no real cure. We know how to stabilize the spine. We know how to take care of the patient after a spinal cord injury, but we don't know how far they will recover. And most of them achieve a very little amount of recovery, and they will remain in their wheelchair all their life.
Is there something particular about the spine that makes it particularly vulnerable to this?
It's a bundle of a lot of fibers in a small place. You know, it's I would say a small sausage with a lot of information surrounded by bone. So the bone is supposed to protect this very precious bundle. However, a fracture of this bone would lead to a very serious damage, because you have this bone, which is a cage around this very soft tissue. And after a fracture, I mean, you know what's happening.
Yeah. And what was it that what was your idea? What were you trying to achieve, and how was it different to what was already out there?
So as Jocelyne said, the spinal cord is really like a bundle of nerves, millions of them, that are interrupted. So the information does not pass anymore. But the spinal cord below the injury, that hosts the cells, we call them neurons, that control muscles, for example, to move, they are intact. But they're disconnected from the brain. So they're in a non-functional state. For decades, people, neurobiologists primarily, aimed at regenerating these severed nerve fibers, which is an impossible task. It's so complicated. There's millions of nerves that need to regrow through an injury, very hostile environment. It seems impossible. We completely reverse the paradigm. Focus on those neurons below the injury that can control movement, but they are not connected with the brain anymore. We aim to reactivate this neuron with electricity.
Jocelyne, how did you feel when, I mean, your expertise is biology rather than physics. How did you feel when Grégoire came to you with this idea?
So my background is I'm a medical doctor. I was trained in neurosurgery with the knowledge that after a spinal cord injury, you cannot move anymore and you're wheelchair bound for the rest of your life. And that was a dogma that I've learned at school, at university, and I've lived most of my career with this idea, with a lot of frustration. And that's also why I decided to become a functional neurosurgeon. You know, you work, you try to have a dialogue with the nervous system with electrodes to modulate the nervous system to improve functions that are deficient after pathologies like Parkinson's disease, in which you have movement disorders, you try to improve that. And I was always very, very interested in improving patients' functionality. That's why I became a functional neurosurgeon. So when I met Grégoire, and that was after also having done 2 years of intense research, fundamental research in cell growth and nervous system regeneration, I knew that together we could achieve something. So he brought this knowledge. He had done all this work on spinal cord injury. I had the expertise on application on people, how to modulate and dialogue with the nervous system. And it was when we met in 2012, I think it was the time to achieve a translation from the animal to the human being.
So let's get on to the technology itself. What is the neuroprosthetic bridge? How are you getting electricity into the bit that doesn't have electricity after an injury?
So the concept is that we are going to have a series of electrodes over the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord that are targeting the nerve roots when they enter the spinal cord. So they are very prone to be depolarized by currents at this location. So Jocelyne can explain you the surgical approach here, but imagine you have a lot of electrodes that can activate, for example, hip flexion or knee extension. So we have, with different electrode, access to different muscle function. And the idea is to activate the electrode at the correct location with the correct timing to reproduce the way the muscles are activated naturally in order to walk. This we can do, for example, in rats, we can have like little Frankenstein experiment almost, whereby you have your fully paralyzed rat and we are tuning the stimulation so that the rat is standing, so then it's walking, it's jumping. We have full control over the movement of the leg of the animals, which we have been able to achieve in human as well. The problem was those movements are involuntary. How to control voluntarily the movement? Then came the idea of the digital bridge, meaning extract the information where it emerges naturally, meaning the cerebral cortex, the brain. So we are recording the electrical signal generated by thousands of neurons. We use AI to decode this information, and we translate the decoded intention to move into precise stimulation of the spinal cord in order to elicit the desired movement.
Mm-hmm. I think you mentioned the caveat earlier on that you're not curing paralysis. You're finding a way to add a bit of function where there was no function before, and I think it's probably really important to emphasise that because there are a lot of people in quite desperate situations who really want it to be cured. Can you give a sense of what this isn't? So presumably using this technology, people won't be feeling, and the amount of information you're transmitting, how does that relate to the amount of information a healthy spine is transmitting?
Compared to the high throughput delivery of information through the millions of bundles of nerves, our transmitted information is very, very limited, talking about a few bytes of information. Basically, do I want to move my left leg, right leg? Is it a flexion or an extension? And how much? So it's very limited. The intelligence, though, is in the way we stimulate the spinal cord. We have a very radically different approach compared to other people who have been stimulating the spinal cord very continuously because of this space-time stimulation. We like to call it biomimetic because we really aim to activate the spinal cord as the brain would do naturally in order to walk. We have this very precise control over the movement of the leg. This said, it still remains a bit robotic and it's really not a natural way of walking. But I said, we need to calibrate expectation. We are not curing paralysis, but we are restoring movement in people who are paralyzed.
Jocelyne, how did you, this is the idea, how did you bring it to life in real people?
I think that when we started working together, we were at the beginning of a new era. So as Grégoire told you, we wanted to stimulate the spinal cord to trying to mimic the way the real spinal cord is stimulated by our brain. So we call it the biomimetic or space-time stimulation. And there were no existing devices to perform this kind of stimulation. So when we started, first of all, the first thing we had to imagine is what are we going to use to stimulate these people?
You need to imagine that she's in front of the rat, and I showed her the rat. It's like, look, Jocelyne, the animal is walking. When are we going to do this in human? And she's like, okay, there is no device.
Yeah, but we had some devices that we could use at the time to stimulate people. And for that, we first decided to use the stimulation electrode that I normally implant to treat chronic pain in patients. And we decided to link them to the neurostimulator that I used to implant in patients with Parkinson's disease. And we got the authorization for Medtronic, this big company that did not develop this therapy, but they allowed us to use this technology and crack the system in order to do the stimulation we wanted to achieve in 10 patients. So this allowed us to do the proof of principle in the first few patients. And we knew at the time that it was possible to achieve a kind of therapy that was way too complicated at the beginning because of the implants that we were using that was not appropriate. And that's also and that was already at the very beginning of our journey, that we thought we need to have an alternative. And if one day this will be a therapy, we'll need a dedicated company that is going to build these devices the way we want them to be. And that's when, in 2014, we founded Onward Medical. And we had a a white loaf of paper and we could design what we wanted.
Yeah, the purpose built technology to achieve precise stimulation of the human spinal cord.
Yeah.
And we were lucky because also it's an era where a lot of things are changing. We have now the possibility, as you said, about brain recording to stimulate the spinal cord. We have the possibility to sense the brain, stimulate. I mean, the development of the technology is at the right time now to achieve this kind of therapies.
Yeah, we have been living a revolution in terms of neurotechnology. A lot of technology to stimulate and record the central nervous system transited from the laboratories and primarily animal models to humans. Suddenly we can use, I would say, humans as like almost experimental subject, like the science is done in human in terms of electrophysiology stimulation, which allow us to accelerate the development of therapies.
And probably 20 years ago, the same idea would not have been possible. That's the right idea at the right time.
Can you remember the very first patient? Take us back to that.
It's very easy. How can we forget David?
Yeah, I mean, there is always a first in all the studies, but it's true that the first who moved, that was a long time ago already. I mean, it was the proof that all what was achieved in the animals would also work in human being. And it was in a way for you a relief because Grégoire had a big pressure from the media, after having published his rat study, that everybody expected him to have a human result. And so you have this little pressure, which is a large pressure, I would even say, until you make it. So
and who
also,
was that human? Who was?
It was David. So, and I met him early when I was still in Zurich, not yet in Lausanne. So before even I met Jocelyne, and he was waiting until we were ready in 2016. So he waited for many years with spinal cord injury to become the first patient. But David is an amazing patient, very strong character. And 2 weeks before the surgery, he had the European Championship of rugby in a wheelchair. So I went, my first daughter was just born. She was a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks old. And at the end, I went to see him and he looked at her in the eyes and he said, "I will walk before you." No, 6 months later, he trained very hard. As Jocelyne said, rehabilitation is very important. But after 6 months, David was by the shore of Lake Léman here in Lausanne. My daughter was, 7 months old. She could not walk yet. And he was taking his first steps outside the lab by the lake. It was this moment still remained amazing for me.
So he did. He walked before her.
He did. He achieved the goal.
If I came to you with a spinal cord injury and I've been paralysed, what are the steps? What happens, and how do you implement this technology in me?
So first of all, we get a lot of requests from all over the world every day. So we have a kind of form that we send to the people, a form in which we see what type of pathology they have, what type of injury do they have, and we kind of classify these people. And we know at the stage of our research, it's still research. So we have clinical trials with a few patients included, max 10, max 12, And depending on the criteria and what we want to study, we decide on this big database of people who could be eligible. And that's the way it works. So unfortunately, both of us wish that one day it's not going to go through this narrow process of selection, but that everybody could one day benefit from the therapy. And that's really our wish.
And what do you do after? Do we select a patient?
Yeah, so I've been selected. I've got through your criteria.
So you've been selected, fine.
Yeah.
So that you've passed already the big first wall.
Yeah.
And then, so if depending on the study, so you, for example, the mobility study, you saw Suzanne, then you'll go through a lot of examination in our center to see if you're eligible in terms of your anatomy, all your condition. Can you enter this? Do you have all the criteria to enter the study? And then, if everything is fine and you agree to have these surgeries, then you'll have 2 surgeries. One, let's give the example of Suzanne. She had a surgery we've implanted electrodes on the dorsal aspect of her spinal cord in order to stimulate all the roots responsible for leg movements. And these electrodes are linked with the neurostimulator that is located under the skin in the region of the belly. And the second surgery is the brain surgery. So we located the region of the brain that is controlling leg movements. And just on top of this region, we put 64 electrodes that are replacing the bone. They are just put on top of the brain. They are not penetrating electrodes, but are superficial electrodes that are replacing the bone. And we close the skin. And these two surgeries are the basis of the next step, which is the recovery process.
And then, so I've got the electrodes on my brain, and is it ready to go, or do you have to make me think about moving my legs, or how do you get my brain to tell my legs what to do?
So those 64 electrodes, not many compared to the billion of electrodes in our brain, are going to pick up the electrical signal generated by population of neurons. One electrode about 1,000 neurons. So you just imagine an electrical signal, a lot of noise that needs to be interpreted. How do we achieve this interpretation? Well, this is when AI is also bringing a revolution. We have been treating this electrical signal as a succession of words, like a sequence of phonemes, like our sentences. So we could use the same principle as the large language models like ChatGPT, etc., to develop what we call brain GPT. So we are interpreting the electrical signal generated by the human brain to generate the intention that is produced by your brain. So if you think about doing a hip flexion, there will be a very specific signal emerging in your brain. We pick up electrical signal more or less related to this desire to do your hip flexion, and the AI, boom, automatically will say, for sure, 90% you want to do hip flexion. And we send it to the stimulator. For this, you need to calibrate your model. But since we have foundation model that we calibrated over time, then within about 50 seconds, the model is calibrated, and Suzanne can use it in order to stimulate her leg, and we gain voluntary movement.
So you don't need to train it on Suzanne's thoughts specifically. We all have similar thoughts about hip flexions, and it's a similar signal if we want to move our legs.
They're always different, but there's some general principle that we can use, and the more we can record brain signal, the more our model becomes very precise. In the case of Suzanne, she still needs about 50 seconds of calibration, which is almost nothing if you think about it.
In 2019, Grégoire, you received a Rolex award for this idea. How significant has that been to your work?
Well, it has been significant in different ways. First, it was very rewarding that a company with the value of Rolex believed that this idea was worth supporting. And it brought a lot of visibility to the project, which was very good for us to raise additional funding that are necessary for a very expensive development. And I even would say that when I look at my watch every day that they offered to me, I realize that there is a mission connected to this watch. It's a reminder daily that we must reverse paralysis. And that's a very meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and that we run out of time. We don't.
That's the feeling we are living with. Jocelyne and I, we are not getting younger. We are running out of time to achieve the dream, which is to reverse paralysis, and we are very far from a cure.
Talking of meaningful and sort of recognition, what does it mean to the patients? What was it like the first time you saw them able to do anything at all?
Mm. You know, each patient is a little bit different and they have a different problem, but all of them when they enter a study, they belong to a team and they are pioneer in a way. And I mean, all those who recovered some movement, they have a surprise because the first movement after many months or years of paralysis is always an excitement. Even those who are the more introverted people had a little tear or, a big surprise.
And Suzanne was like 13 years of complete paralysis. On day one, she could extend the leg.
Mm-hmm. And then there is after this moment of surprise and to see that something is functioning again, you need patience because you will have to train quite a lot in order to improve. It's not from one day to the other that you'll recover your muscles, that you'll become independent in your walk. It takes a lot of time. So you can have a little bit of ups and downs because it's not something that is sudden, but the team is really encouraging them. And now with the experience we have, all of them, I think, gained a lot of confidence and also a lot of movement.
Well, I think we need to hear from one of the test pilots, and we need to go to someone who's actually lived it. We're heading into the lab to meet one of your patients and see how this technology is changing lives up close.
So Suzanne has a Reimagine implant, replacing a flap of bone or of her skull. And the implant is passive and is totally under the skin, so she has no connectors outside the skin. And it doesn't have a battery. That's why, and we use this antenna to power the implant and stream the signals out of it. So this is just embedded in this simple capic that Susan wears during the sessions. And then the signals travel to my laptop where the decoding and the translation of her thoughts into stimulation patterns happens. And then through the laptop, via Bluetooth, we communicate to the main controller that is then placed in front of Suzanne's belly where the implants pulse generator, where the pulse generator is implanted.
I'm now here inside the NeuroRestore lab. This is a space full of motion sensor capture cameras, and we've got this walking track. And I'm here with someone who has been living through the transformation. This is where patients fitted with the implant come to relearn how to move one step at a time. Hello, Suzanne. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Can you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your life before the injury?
Yes, so my name is Suzanne. I am based in North Devon. I am in my 30s, junior specific age. And I work in travel. And before my injury, I was injured when I was 22, so about 14 years ago. I have always been very sporty, very active, and I've tried to continue that as much as possible since my accident.
And how did the injury happen?
So I was in Morocco. I was working in a surf camp, and I was standing on a balcony, and the railing gave way, and I fell forwards, and I fell about 20 feet and broke my back.
What was like after that?
Life wasn't great, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine your whole life changing in a split second, but that is what happens when you get a spinal injury. It's something you don't see coming, you can't plan for it, and you lose all feeling, all movement below your level of injury, or in my case, because I have a complete injury, that's what's happened to me. So everything, I had to relearn everything from showering, dressing, transferring into a wheelchair, getting into a car. I had to learn to drive using hand controls. So just kind of every element of your life becomes something you need to sort of go back to square one and rethink. And everything takes longer. It's a bit harder. And there's physical challenges, and then there's the mental side of it as well, which I really struggled with. I was 22, so I had a lot of living to do, a lot of fun to be had, and it really knocks your confidence, how you see yourself, your image. You're sitting down suddenly. So it is, spinal injuries are pretty devastating. I had my surgery March 17th, and I had an incision in my head, one in my tummy, one in my back, and then one on my side. So a few cuts.
And then how long for that until you get in this and try it for the first time?
So the recovery from the surgery was quite quick, despite all the things. So I had 2 weeks just to recover and recover. And then I came back. So I went home for a little bit, and then I came back here, and that's when we start. They call it mapping. So it's sort of figuring out the different, stimulation to my spine that is needed to make my leg muscles move. So that happens all pretty quickly. So I get to see my legs moving for the first time just a couple of weeks after the surgery. And then they're also testing the brain connection. So sort of learning how easy it is for me to sort of make the intention to move my left leg and my right leg. Can they because they're kind of reading my brain, I guess. So they need to make sure that there's a clear distinction between me intending a left step versus a right step. And we tried different strategies of like, do I think about picking up the hip? Do I think about picking up the foot or the knee? Like, what is it that they can interpret best so that then we can put it all into practice? So we do a couple of weeks of mapping and then we get going with this phase.
And with the mapping, so you presumably haven't thought about walking. For 14 years, you haven't put one foot in front of the other. What's happening in your brain? Are you now thinking about walking? Is it the same as the rest of us thinking about walking and suddenly it's being applied?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'd say I have to be more intentional probably than you. I think you probably naturally just, go off and walk, and I obviously have to think left step, right step. So I definitely, it's more intentional. I have definitely noticed that since we've been training with this, the intention is less like severe. I don't have to concentrate quite so much. I can sometimes almost talk a bit while I'm sort of thinking. So, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is that the decoding gets good enough that it can pick up my sort of subtle intentions, and then it just interprets them well enough for the steps. So yeah, it's quite surreal that I have to think about walking instead of wheeling.
And what was it like the first time? Because this isn't miraculously, step out and I'm,
No.
emerging from my wheelchair. But what's it like to see it move, think about it moving and having it move?
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal what science and technology are capable of. I have done a lot of physio rehab since my accident, and I've used exoskeletons, so I have had physios move my legs for me, and sort of been in this situation and being upright. But I've never had it where, firstly, I'm initiating the steps and I'm sort of controlling them, and secondly, that I can kind of feel the muscle actually, like I can feel my leg lock out, and then I know, I can put weight on that now, and I can shift over and then take the next step. So it's learning to sort of trust my legs is a very, very weird concept, because for 14 years, I've been told, well, your legs they can't do anything. So, I rely fully on my arms and my upper body. So now it's quite a foreign concept to, try and trust my legs again. Yeah, it's very surreal that I'm part of this. I sometimes wake up and I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing this. Like, this is like, I'm the second person in the world. There's only a handful of us in the world that have had this kind of thing and are doing this. So I'm part of this. Like, that's cool.
And at the moment, you're here, you've got the harness,
Yes.
You've got the walking beams and all of this. How is this going to be incorporated into your normal life? Because, this is great, but this isn't going about your
My
job.
house isn't like this. So the goal is, we're, I think, 8 or 9 weeks into rehab at the moment. The goal is hopefully we lower the body weight support so that it's taking less of my weight. We already have reduced it quite a lot since we started. We've already started swapping out the parallel bars for a walking frame. So hopefully the goal is that I will not need this, and that I will not need these, and I will have a walking frame, and I will be able to fully support my own body weight. My legs will be strong enough for that. So we keep working towards that, trusting the process, the physios, the engineers, everyone seems happy with the direction we're going in.
Yeah.
So we just keep going.
And I appreciate that for people in your situation, hope can be a sort of dangerous thing.
Yes, it can.
Has this changed how you think about the future, or how are you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think what's really interesting, because I think so many past clinical trials and things have been on patients that are incomplete. So, people who already have some movement, their spinal injuries aren't that severe, or people that have been injured quite recently. So, I'm kind of the worst of the worst. I was injured 14 years ago and I have a complete spinal cord injury. And so I think to see that this kind of technology is firstly even being tried on, people like me is really cool, and I think really promising. So I think it's, not a case of, a cure's around the corner and it's going to happen. But I think this is, a really significant moment for what I think the future hopefully will hold. And I would love to think that people are newly injured can see what's possible, because I didn't have that when I was injured. It was just like, no, this is it. There's no cure for spinal injury, so like just get used to life in a wheelchair. So I think even seeing that like this sort of thing is possible and it is developing very well and showing a lot of promise, I think that is incredibly exciting.
It was great to meet Suzanne and hear about how the digital bridge has changed her life. She's one of the many people you're working with. I guess it'd be nice now to think about where this is going to go. Grégoire, how many people could this technology help potentially?
I mean, our goal is to ensure that this technology becomes available for everybody who are in need of, or the desire to move again. So again, we need to recalibrate expectation. We are not going to cure paralysis with this therapy, but we are going to empower people with paralysis to stand, to regain movement, which brings a lot of benefits, like in terms of physiology, in terms of how you feel yourself in society, like to be able to stand, to look at somebody in the eyes. One of our patients, Gertjan, loved to have a beer standing at the bar. It means a lot for him socially. No, he regained this capacity. It was very meaningful for him. You know, so need to set expectation, right? But our hope is that within the next 5 years, this technology will be available to empower people with paralysis to regain movement.
Jocelyne, what's the next challenge surgically? What do you hope to be able to do with it?
You know, in terms of what we want to achieve, we need to make things easily accessible and user-friendly, and we are working on that. Having for the other people, because I was the pioneer with this team to implant these patients, but I would like other colleagues to be able to do it easily. And if we want it to be a standard treatment, we need a better way to stimulate, a better way to program the system, and we are working on that. But I mean, in terms of surgical performance, I think most of my colleagues could do it. So it's not a very challenging surgery. The challenge is to do it well and precisely.
So what's the long-term vision for it then?
I hope it's not a too long-term vision. I mean, if 10 years from now, you have a spinal cord injury and you are not immediately implanted with this system to empower you to recover more, then we have failed. Let's be very clear. That's our mission, and as Jocelyne said, we are running out of time. And we know this therapy is effective. It's not a miracle, but it's effective. This is the first therapy that will help people to regain movement. So our mission, our responsibility is to bring it to everyone who needs it.
Well, Jocelyne, Grégoire, good luck. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tom.